Hi, I'm Diana Pearce. I'm on the faculty at the School of Social Work at the University of Washington, and I'm here today to talk about the self-sufficiency standard. The self-sufficiency standard is a measure of how much it takes to meet your basic needs at a minimally adequate level. So that means that at a minimally adequate level, that means whatever it takes to meet your needs without any public or private assistance. So that means that without the help of, say, food stamps or Medicaid to help with your food or healthcare costs, but also private assistance like babysitting by a relative or a friend for little or no cost. And it's at a minimally adequate level, so that means that it's the same level like for housing as for people who receive housing assistance. The food budget is a real bare bones budget. No pizza, no latte, no takeout or restaurant food of any kind. Same thing with transportation. It's just commuting to and from work and one shopping trip a week. So Americans spend like over 40% of their food budget outside of the home, outside of groceries. This is a real bare bones budget. The federal poverty measure was developed over 50 years ago by Molly Orshansky, and that poverty measure has become outdated and has actually become over time much too low. It was developed then. The only thing she really had information on was what it cost to meet a minimally nutritional diet. So she used food, and since families spent on an average a third of their income on food at that time, she just multiplied that by 3, assuming that would cover everything else at a minimally adequate level. However, over time, those proportions have changed. Food has risen, but other things like healthcare and housing have risen more. New needs have arisen, such as taxes. Low-income families didn't used to pay taxes. Childcare, because most adults are in the workforce now, so you need to have childcare if you have young children. So there's a lot of changes. Plus, when the federal poverty measure was developed, it was the same for everywhere, and it's still the same for everywhere except Hawaii and Alaska. And there's actually now a huge variation by geography as where you live in terms of the costs, and so the self-sufficiency standard is county by county what the costs are. And it also varies by not only the number of children, but the ages of children. So it takes into account things like childcare, which vary a great deal by the age of the child. So there's a lot of difference with the federal poverty measure. It's keeping up with costs as costs have increased over time in a way the federal poverty measure has not done so. So the federal poverty measure now is really just a measure of deprivation, whereas the self-sufficiency standard gives you a realistic idea of what the minimum is to meet your basic needs, such as housing, food, childcare, healthcare. We have the self-sufficiency standard in 37 states. Arizona is not the most expensive state, but we did find costs have increased a lot. So today for Santa Cruz County, for example, not the most expensive place, but it costs from a little over $8 an hour for a single person to meet their basic needs to that single person becomes a single parent with a preschooler. That almost doubles to over $15 an hour. Even if there's 2 parents with 2 children, each of them has to earn at least $11 an hour. And this is a pretty substantial increase over the last decade. We first did the standard in Arizona in 2002, and over the last decade, the costs have increased by 31%, a little over 3% per year. And this is faster than the Consumer Price Index, the measure that is used to update the federal poverty measure. So we can see that real costs for families at this basic level are increasing even faster than the Consumer Price Index, and certainly faster than wages. For example, of the 10 top occupations in terms of the numbers of people in those occupations in Arizona, only 2 of them, nurses and managers, have wages at the self-sufficiency level. The most common other occupations such as retail sales, waiters, those kinds of occupations are well below self-sufficiency levels. So there's a real challenge facing Arizona, as well as in many states, of trying to meet the needs of families whose wages are not meeting the basic needs, and basic needs are increasing faster than their wages. The self-sufficiency standard is used in many different ways, starting at the individual level, working with clients. So if someone comes in, they're looking for, they've been unemployed, out of the workforce, standard can help them figure out which jobs are going to pay self-sufficiency wages, and then you can get help figuring out how you're going to get to that, what training or skills do you need to get those jobs. The self-sufficiency standard is used by organizations to evaluate the programs, which programs are helping people get over that threshold of self-sufficiency. It can also be used by states and policymakers to look at how they're allocating resources. Should we put money into this training program, or should we subsidize this particular enterprise or sector to come into the state? Are they going to pay self-sufficiency wages, or are we going to end up having to not only subsidize those jobs to come into the state, but also subsidize the workers kind of through the back door, a second kind of subsidy to help them with the cost of child care or health care for their children because the wages are not high enough. So it helps decide, are we doing well with what we are doing to move people not just out of poverty in the federal poverty measure, but actually to a level where they can be self-sufficient, where they can become tax-paying citizens. Phoenix and Tucson are comparable. For example, Phoenix is less expensive than Chicago, but a little bit more than Portland, Oregon, whereas Tucson is comparable to Salt Lake City and Louisville, and a little bit quite a bit less than Seattle, but more expensive than, say, Baltimore City, Las Vegas, or Oklahoma City. So comparable to cities of similar size. You can get information about Arizona from womengiving.org on the web, online. For other states, you can go to self-sufficiency standard.org, where Arizona plus all the other 37 states are available.